grateful that you're going to be sharing, and I'll just kind of guide you smoothly when it's time to transition slides. I'll make sure I kind of flag to the next one, and we'll go from there. But having you sharing saves me the fumbling around and all that stuff, and I could just kind of talk to the audience about the different things tied to the slide, which is great.
Absolutely.
Plus, you never know with tech issues, like God forbid something went wrong with sharing, or it's just better to be in your hands.
Yes.
Yeah, we've had some fair amount of talk on this. We've seen on the list here, or on this talk. So, but they said the second month that we're doing it through the city. We had it being done through the University of Minnesota, but then their two interns were working through through a climate funding project left, and they didn't tell us. You didn't tell us. So all of a sudden, they're gone in this 3 days.
They both gave us 2 weeks notice. So on the team that I'm working on, we are currently dealing with a lot of whiplash.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And it was, like I said, we got through it, but it's like, all right, quick adjust, fire, and move forward. So we're just, so working with David on that, and we're working on trying to transition, the support and all that. So David's been champ, and it's really appreciated. I miss Faye and Natalie a lot, but and then we had Gabe and Gladys working out on our end here, and then Gabe and Gladys left the same week. They were ARPA funded, and they needed to find some other jobs, and so all of a sudden we had to pivot again. But now we're with Katie here and Yusto in the background, and it's working out great. So appreciate the assistance that's been done to date here. We're going to be just starting up and just give it a couple of minutes here. We're still a minute ahead of time. We'll have people coming on in. It's good to see a lot of folks popping up here. So how was Climate Week, Jason?
Yeah, it's I'm gonna actually give a couple of updates on the call today, but I felt that it was on the biochar side, extremely task oriented and focused this year in a way that I haven't seen it in a long time, which is great. I mean, really seeing everybody come together and focusing on the product and the output of the production process, which I think is extremely important, and it's obviously something you all are at the forefront of. So I'll go into detail a little bit, but I was very pleased with Climate Week this year.
Yeah, I really wish I could have made it. I had mandatory training, or as I like to call it, mandatory fun time here. Okay, we are at the top of the hour, and just give it a moment here for some more folks.
I'm like a pilot, Jim. If we wait a couple more minutes, I can make up time in the air. But we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to join.
Yeah, no, exactly. Thank you for thank you for working with us on this here. Last month we had Tobias Schweitzer. You may have met him out in Sacramento, but he came to us from Stuttgart, Germany, talking about AI. We just got notice of another large research project in Nebraska through the University of Nebraska that is going to be coming to us in January. So we're getting some good things to talk about. And Jason, we're really excited to have you on board here today for today's Char Talk.
There is a lot to cover.
Yeah. Well, they're just popping on.
And Cole, I always joke with my colleagues. It's like I'm late. I'm late to every call by a couple of minutes, so I feel such sympathy for everybody. Hence why I'm good with starting a few minutes after the hour, because I feel that.
Yep.
There are always people filtering in.
Yep. At some point, in about another minute, we'll call the start, and people will be coming in, and seeing some familiar faces, but a lot of new ones, and it's glad to see the international presence. A lot of times we'll figure out who has the longest traveled distance. I hear you still.
Yes. That is my boss. He was just walking by.
I already had to deal with him a couple hours ago. All right. Well, we're at 12:02, and I just want to, we'll get started here and let people filter in as they come. But I want to welcome you all to the October Char Talk through the Minnesota Biochar Initiative, where we bring in speakers from around the country and around the world to present on topics pertaining to biochar and all parts of the industry. And we're very happy to see you. By coming here, just to be aware of, we are recording this and we'll be making this available. We're working on our own YouTube channel, but also through the USBI's YouTube channel as well. And I do want to welcome here today, we have an exciting topic here today. We've been working with Jason and Grain Ecosystems to bring this on. So I'm glad to see that we're finally coming to fruition here. But Jason Dodier is a business leader and expert in the circular economy, biochar, and decarbonization. He is the co-founder of Grain Ecosystem, which leverages AI and data to streamline waste to energy projects, focusing on biochar for carbon sequestration and community optimization, while improving the likelihood of securing project financing. With a background in project finance and years of commercial leadership at sustainability leader Schneider Electric, Jason has played a key role in some of the world's largest and most strategic public-private partnership and any energy transition initiatives. He also serves on the board of the Amazonia Fund Alliance and regularly speaks at global events on sustainability, innovation, and economic models. And we want to welcome you. And Jason, before we do further introduction on that, just to let you know, this is MNBI. The Char Talk is a monthly event. We're bringing experts from in the business from around the country and around the world. If you would like to be on the recurring invitation list for Char Talk, please put your name and email in the chat, and we'll capture that and add you to the standing invitation list. Also, if you're new to Char Talk, please feel free to leave a name, your name and where you're from, and a quick hi to the folks so we can get to know you. We have people from all over coming on into here. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jason.
Jim, what can I say? Thank you so much. It seems like yesterday we were having discussions together about doing a program, and it's finally here, and I'm just honored to be part of it. I want to thank my new friend Katie, who's going to be helping us go through the slides today and ensure a seamless experience for everybody. And it's so funny as I look at the guest list, AI assistants have absolutely transformed how we interact with technology and how we engage. I think there's at least 10 to 12 of them in the room here, and hopefully they'll get some good notes and good output. And to be honest, to get started, Jim, you may not know this, but I'm always referencing the work the Minnesota Biochar Initiative is doing, what you all have done. For those that maybe are new to this group, advancing a facility with 3,600 tons of ash tree waste into 500 tons of biochar annually to get started. Your initiative is focused. You're always about circular economy, and the work that you do that to inspire entrepreneurs like myself, the team at Grain, and many, many others is really fantastic, because in order to have innovation, you need collaboration and shared vision. You need to bring, as I said in a talk recently, public and private together. and Minnesota Biochar is a beacon of the potential biochar can have. And then you bring in the great work of the USBI, and I think John Webster, I saw him come on the call earlier, US Biochar Coalition, the IBI, and then teams like ourselves. It really, and all the developers are on this call today, it really makes for a very special environment that has driven biochar to a level that quite frankly makes me really excited. And you asked me at the beginning, Jim, about Climate Week. For those of you that were here, we hosted the US Biochar Revolution event in partnership with USBI. And again, very focused on productization. And the emphasis there was how to get started and how to think about starting smart in the process, and then all about execution, financing. These are elements we're going to discuss more today, but I was so thrilled with the turnout, and I'm hoping that next year we'll be able to do it on a larger scale. And certainly we'll have the big event in Minnesota that USBI is going to be hosting, and Jim, your team's going to play a big role. So again, thank you everybody for having me. And Katie, without further ado, we can advance to the next slide and get started. So just to start things off and really set the stage here, first and foremost, obviously everybody on this call is very passionate about biochar. We're passionate about circular economy. But when you think of the lens of investors and many of the people that are looking at the space, they're very skeptical of any solution that requires humanity's hearts to grow 3 sizes. And the goal for what we try to do and how we approach the market is thinking through embracing sustainable practices that are not only advantageous for the environment, but they lead to improved financial performance, either via cost cutting, enhancing operational efficiencies. The most intelligent investments are delivering the highest returns. And if you look at this space today, I was giving a talk earlier at the Wall Street Green Summit Digital on Monday. The economics are there when you look at these projects. You have serious capital that is going to be flowing into the waste to value space over the next couple of decades. And biochar continues to be proven out as one of the most promising and prominent solutions, as we've been able to see by the hundreds of investors we're engaging with and talking to and helping to educate. And ultimately, some of the smartest minds in the world have said we believe biochar can contribute between 2 to 7 gigatons of removals a year. So laying the groundwork, this is very exciting. You see Tom Steyer there. His book is behind me. I think he does a great job, along with John Dodier, of really painting a picture, both around the economics and the financials around decarbonization and climate change, but thinking about it in a manner that can drive capital in a more effective way into the space. So this is where I give you some statistics to kick off. Katie, if we could go advance to the next slide, please. Now, one of the topics that I am always thinking about, or what keeps me up at night a lot, just in general when looking at the space, and prior I did a lot of work in energy as a service accelerating microgrids, is really the concept of tragedy of the commons. And tragedy of the commons really is when you think about destruction of shared resources as a result of individual choices that prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability. And if you take it a step further and you think about this space and biochar and things that we're all passionate about, we've seen over a number of decades what destructive farming practices and the overuse of harmful chemicals and fertilizers can do. Not only do they lead to soil degradation, water pollution, loss of biodiversity, public health risks, and the list goes on, but we have seen post pre-industrialization, carbon in our soils have decreased substantially in many, many places. If you look at the United States today, Iowa has the 2nd highest cancer rate in the country. It's alarming, and part of the reason is you have harmful chemicals and fertilizers used in agricultural on public health. You've got runoff getting on skin. On the other hand, Minnesota is often recognized for its very strong agricultural practices and quality soils and ranks among the best in the country. So again, coming back to the concept of what Minnesota is doing in the lens of tragedy of the commons. In addition to the resource element, you have other things that are essentially fighting for capital and taking money away from biochar. So if you look at things like direct air capture, it's a technology that in some cases is viewed as more mature and commercially viable. However, and investors see direct air capture potentially as a way to scale up faster in terms of capturing CO2. But ultimately, at the end of the day, biochar is something that's been around a very long time. It's something that has been proven out. Obviously, we're constantly working on developing and scaling technology and understanding what are the best fits for certain scenarios. And it's our job collectively, all of us on this call, to be active and engaging to highlight the opportunities. And the other thing is, and this is what the US Biochar Coalition has been fantastic at doing, is really pushing from a government supported perspective. When you look at things like 45Q, the money that the DOE is allocating, we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail, but there's a lot of visibility and attractiveness around DAC that is there, and a lot of major corporations that are putting capital. And I think it's just a big miss and a chasm when it comes to education. And this is something that we are all working actively to overcome. So it's important to understand some of the roots of tragedy of the commons and how we overcome that to further scale the market today. Next slide, please, Katie. Okay, so I think it's always important at the end of the day, we are all people. So there's great physical technologies, software applications. Obviously, we have a lot of AI bots in the call today, but it's bringing all of this together to have real impacts. And at Grain, we've been really fortunate to have the chance to engage with project developers all over the world. And I've gotten to travel to some really incredible sites. I spent half of my career as well living and working across Middle East and Africa, Europe. So my perspective has really been crafted by those experiences, and we try to bring those to bear here. And obviously a lot of the work we do is in the US market. But when customers reach out, a lot of times it's the question of how do we turn a cost center into a profit center? And we have a waste problem. Obviously, as somebody who's a climate evangelist, I always want to talk about the benefits of carbon sequestration and the biodiversity impact. John Webster and I talk about this all the time and all the different statistics that are out there. But at the end of the day, it comes back to the economics to get these projects to pencil. So what you see on the screen today is one of our projects. It's a sugar mill in Louisiana in Baton Rouge. We have some videos online for this opportunity. And what we help them do is really think about, all right, how do you take excess waste, which is in this case bagasse. They also have a very large mountain of waste, which I've seen at, it's been a commonality at many of the sites that we visited. And the mindset here is how do we help them to think through that, optimize potential access to carbon markets. So figuring out what is the best carbon methodology for them, ultimately thinking through the technology application. I see many project developers that reach out and they think either they don't have a technology, they've got a technology that doesn't align with the feedstock and the throughput and the location and the scale potential. So we're trying to help improve the odds of projects being successful. In the case here, they're part of somebody's value chain, like most companies are. They are looking to monetize carbon credits. In addition, selling the biochar as a soil amendment, and then looking at other use cases, such as obviously heating and cooling and electricity. And also one of the big ones, which again is a favorite statistic that we got from our friends at USBI, 20% additive of biochar to cattle feed reduces methane emissions by 90%, which is a fascinating statistic. So again, project economics, thinking through it, trying to find ways to improve the odds of being successful. And many times when you go meet with investors, you have one shot and you want to ensure that your business plan is battle tested and you know exactly how much capital you need. There's got to be a little bit of a degree where you might be off on that capital, but ensuring you're really in the ballpark. And at Grain, that's part of what we're trying to do, is to help model out those project economics and prepare those materials to build speed and scale and standardization. Next slide, please. And as the next slide's coming up, of course, I know what the slide is already. So it's digging in a little bit more on what I call kind of the Grain factor, or the factor that is really focused on people. We look at lots of different use cases. As Jim mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about the event we co-hosted with USBI, the Biochar Carbon Revolution during Climate Week. Very, very focused on applications. We looked at applications for biochar in cement, concrete. We were joined by our friends at Lafarge that gave some really interesting use cases in solid carbon. We looked at discussions from the Davy Tree Company and how they're transforming and leveraging biochar in the circular economy there. But just seeing all the different stakeholders. And in addition, again, circular economy, my coffee today coming from Tiolita Biochar out of Colombia. Fantastic, delicious coffee. And it's something that I highly recommend everybody on the call check out and support, because at the end of the day, this is what makes us tick. And I don't think there's a use case we have not seen today in terms of feedstock type. Obviously, bottom right, looking at pistachio shells, walnut shells, almond shells. This is a really nutrient-rich feedstock and produces a really nice biochar byproduct. So again, just wanted to bring some pictures to light. We did host the event on a rooftop. I thought it would be, most people that are doing biochar were very outdoorsy. Myself, if I wasn't worried about internet connectivity, I'd probably be doing this talk outside. But we thought it was really important to try, even in the concrete jungle that is New York City, to do an event on a rooftop. And thankfully, it didn't rain and it worked out really well. So thanks to all of you that are on the call that made that day a great success. And like I said, we will be doing more of it. And I'm eager to do a big event together in Minnesota. Next slide, please. And just one note on the grain factor. I didn't go too in detail on what it is we do at the beginning, but to the whole point of leveraging machine learning, leveraging data, and ultimately experiences from people around the world, why grain exists is to really build that transparency and standardization, really putting the project developer first. At the end of the day, the loyalty for all of the groups I mentioned at the beginning, and grain included, is to ensure project developers are armed with the right knowledge, tools, technology, confidants, and capabilities to ensure that they're maximizing the opportunity for themselves, and in many cases, the next generation. I think when I visit a lot of customer sites and have discussions, one of the first questions is the next generation getting involved? How are they thinking through this opportunity? How do we get them more engaged and excited about the opportunity at hand? Because that is ultimately what's going to move the needle. And the biggest thing too, that my co-founder Ryan and I saw at the very beginning was, when you go to the standards bodies and registries, massive bottlenecks because everybody's submitting different documentation, different form factors, different Excel files. So if we could build some structure into that model, it's going to help get these projects done faster, get rid of that intensive paperwork and all those headaches, and ultimately as well, help all of you project developers not have to read through hundreds of pages of highly technical documentation when you could just go through different digitized flows and form factors to understand eligibility. And the last thing I'll say, we saw so many project developers, especially in developing economies, that were operating under the guise of thinking they were eligible, so spending time and money. And that's just not acceptable, in my opinion. I think people need to be, first of all, treated with dignity, but in addition, have dissemination of resources to understand what they need to do. We've already made things complicated enough. I know there's a lot of well-meaning groups out there that are trying to drive that know-how and that knowledge base. But for grain, it's all about how do we improve simplification. And at the heart of that is education and learning. And that's one of the reasons again, as I've said, I'm honored to be here with Jim and the team to be talking more about this really important topic. So next slide, please. And I'd be remiss, obviously, one of the highlights of our event, we had Robert Hoagland, who's one of the founders of CDR.FYI. He joined my co-founder Ryan on a panel that was really focused on looking at the investment landscape. I bring this up only because obviously CDR.FYI has been a place where a lot of people rely on to get credible and really important information. But the point to make here for the individuals that are curious about biochar, maybe not as in the weeds as many of us are, biochar is leading in carbon dioxide removal. So we see that today. The stats are there. It's the lowest cost option among durable CDR technologies, and largely due to its established status and multiple revenue streams. But for biochar to become the preferred end fate for waste biomass, we've got to really look at the co-benefits from production and ensure that both are recognized and utilized to mitigate climate change. So for me, it's biochar to become that preferred fate for waste biomass. You've got to think about the economics, and you've also got to think about the science. Typically, biochar only converts about, I think it's around 1/3 of the carbon in biomass into biochar. So to maximize climate mitigation from the other components, as I said earlier, such as heat, electricity from pyrogases, gases, as well as the physical biochar, that is going to be critical. Otherwise, from a purely climate perspective, you're going to see a lot of people looking to do things such as biomass burial or energy from sustainable aviation fuel, or eSAF, which is something that, again, has been a very, very it's a growing topic. It's something that Miles Gray and I have discussed at great length, and we'll be talking about it next week. For those of you that are going to be at Carbon Unbound, Miles and I are going to be doing some fireside chats to talk about biochar, again, with this very topic at the forefront, really looking at productization and helping think through not just things like financial additionality and permanence, but really about co-benefits and products and how to improve and diversify the capital stack of the revenue streams, which we'll look at a little bit later in the presentation. Katie, if you don't mind, we'll go to policy now and give some updates on the policy side. So as I mentioned, the grain team is a very proud member of the U.S. Biochar Coalition. I spent many years of my career in DC. At the time, I was part of the Green Grid, which was one of the groups responsible for putting together the terminology and methodology around power usage effectiveness. So figuring out how to make data centers highly efficient, ensuring you're right sizing the application so you're not using more heating, cooling, and power than you need for the data center. And ultimately, some of the things that we've seen, and even in the last week, a couple of updates on my side. And again, big shout out to the whole team at USBC for the work that they're doing and really being at the cutting edge. USDA just this week announced 7.7 billion, I think was the number, for climate smart practices on agricultural lands. And I think 5.5 billion of that roughly was aimed at really helping stakeholders adapt to changing temperatures, precipitation patterns, droughts, severe weather events. Obviously, we've seen no shortage of those over the last couple of months. And for those of you that are based in Florida or have been displaced due to some of these recent hurricanes, thoughts obviously with you. We've got a big community of people that we've been working with around the clock to get a feel for what's happening and how we can add value. And some of our corporate partners as well that are on the ground are doing as much as they can to help individuals there. But the NRCS team in Florida has been one of the best to work with within the USDA, and obviously they understand the urgency. They're moving fast, but was very excited to see that USDA announcement. The U.S. Treasury, on the other side, the U.S. Treasury overseeing various tax credits in the IRA, they are planning to release guidance on implementing several credits, including, as I mentioned here, tech neutral production and investment tax credits by the year end. So when I was in DC a couple of weeks ago, one of the big things was really pressing for 45Q to be tech neutral. So we can drive more of the capital away from, not necessarily away from direct air capture and CCUS, but ensuring that biochar is getting its fair shake. And then the DOE has unveiled their carbon management strategy. And this is giving a roadmap to really think through how to capture, transport, convert, and store, leveraging different technologies. And certainly biochar is there. One other thing I would highlight on this slide that is important, especially for those of you that are based in California, SB 253 and 261. So as I mentioned earlier, most companies are part of somebody's supply chain. If you are a business that is over $1 billion in revenue and you're operating in California, which is almost everybody in that sphere, you have to do a couple of things. One of them is be ready to disclose your emissions tied to scope 3. And another is ensuring that you are going to be in place to publish a commitment to achieve zero reductions by 2045. So net zero commitment. So California, again, at the forefront of trying to help us accelerate, scale, and drive change. And for us at Grain, the mindset always is, how do we maximize non-dilutive sources of cash flow and injection of capital into your business, and thinking about ways that you can use incentives and grants and USDA-backed loans and other things to do your projects. And everything you see here and all the work that's happening, this is how we move the needle forward. And this is how you're ensuring you maintain as much ownership as possible in your projects and avoid complexity of the stack as you go forward, especially the ownership stack. And if you don't mind, Katie, we'll advance on to the next one. We're going to look a little bit more at profit and emissions. So coming back to the earlier topic around tragedy of the commons and really looking at the carbon space, this is a great article, and I will drop a link into the chat after. I thought I had cited it. I don't see it on the slide here, but I will cite it. Again, Robert Hoagland played a very strong role in this. I think it's one of the best articles that I have read recently on thinking through economics. Basically, at a very high level, there's a couple of things to think through as you kind of look at the chart here. First of all, low emission, high profit industries. Think about banking. So companies like JP Morgan that are at the top of the leaderboard, if you look at CDR.FYI, they can afford higher carbon removal prices, while emitting sectors with lower profits might contribute less. And the reason for some of this is essentially, if you think about these highly profitable businesses, they are able to generate a much higher ROI because their costs are so much lower. So if a large company paid a carbon cost of, let's say, $200 a ton, it could generate potentially around $23 billion for climate initiatives. So meeting future funding agreements and needs could be very, very exciting and prevalent. When you look across all sectors today, all sectors could potentially offset 10% of emissions through permanent removals, with costs ranging from negligible to 20% of profit. So I highly encourage everybody to check out this article. It's a really short read. It's got great graphics, and it does a really nice job of kind of providing some nice insights that could lend themselves not just to carbon markets and carbon credits, but also around the underlying economics of the physical products, because many of the companies involved on the screen in those industries, they're going to be procurers of the product. And let's advance to the next slide. We're going to look a little bit more at what that looks like. And as I said earlier, my good friend John Webster moderated one of our main panels at the US Biochar Revolution event. And that panel was with the Davey Tree Company. And that was, for me, one of my favorite panels because you got some amazing insights from a billion-dollar company on how they are leveraging biochar. You see at the bottom, I took a quote that I think is, and I think John and the team reposted this, but it's a really powerful one. Because if you can incorporate biochar into operations and reduce plant loss from 35% to 5%, resulting in healthier plants and happier customers, what a tagline. I mean, that's a great win for our industry. And I was really proud to see the Davey Tree Company and the work that they're doing and their leadership standing behind it. You know, we looked at, we had discussions around potting media and the potential there. I know this is a favorite, certainly of Miles, and it's one that I've been getting more educated on as we continue to go forward and looking at some of the big companies that are working here. And Rosie Soil is a great example. Chad Masura and his team there and what they're doing. Carbon neutral concrete is one that's getting a ton of attention. So the team at Lafarge and Solid Carbon had a great discussion, and they talked a little bit about how to think through low carbon concrete and how to bring this sector forward and how to help them tolerate maybe higher costs of carbon removal solutions. But there's really innovative and creative ideas. And the other thing too, you know, we had representatives from some companies that are looking at water infrastructure. So many of us on the call understand inherently that water filtration is a great byproduct. I was actually talking to a water infrastructure fund recently, and they were trying to figure out, well, how do we differentiate ourselves when we're bidding for a project? And basically I said very simply, hey, have you thought about leveraging the biosolids and the sewer sludge as a byproduct to create, you know, new revenue streams and improve biodiversity in those communities? And they actually ended up baking that into the proposal. Again, it was just a small thing, but it's just a proof point of what we can do with all of the opportunities tied to upgrading the water infrastructure in this country and how we're approaching dealing with those types of waste. So biochar productization is accelerating. Miles and I will be talking a lot about this very topic next week at Carbon Unbound, and it's something that we're going to continue to share information on as we go forward. Let's, if it's okay, let's advance onwards to the next slide. Oh, and by the way, that N that I had flagged there was Nespresso. Some of you may have caught that. Obviously, a lot of the discussion or a lot of the excitement in the industry has come from the net zero Nespresso discussion. Certainly, again, 20 billion tons of byproduct coffee waste goes into landfills globally per year. It's probably higher. That's just the statistic somebody that is in the weeds gave me, and I think it's probably in the ballpark. But reusing coffee and cacao byproduct and proving it out is exceptional, and kudos to that whole team for being active in South America, and hopefully we're going to see a lot more scale there. A couple other end use cases I wanted to call out. As you can imagine, our team is watching the market with great interest. We are working with many project developers, and our goal is to try to get to execution as fast as we possibly can. But these are a couple of use cases that I thought were really interesting that I'd seen. Some of you may have seen many of them. Others you might not have, but they represent different endpoints. Again, building on what I said at the beginning about what Minnesota is doing, these are other elements. So if you think about from a fertilizer perspective and what's happening there, CD is constructing a $12 million facility in Vermont to convert waste biomass into renewable fuel gas and biochar fertilizer. I think they're going to produce over 1,500 tons of biochar annually. They probably have a scale-up plan. I have not spoken to the team, but I've been reading with interest. And I think it's, Vermont is a place that is easy to get to for most, and it's beautiful, especially this time of year. So hoping to get that project online fast, and also exciting to see net new technology coming into the space, because again, at Grain, we're always looking to see the technology use cases and how we can pair them up with project developers to maximize opportunities and streamline projects. Additionally, our friends at the Carbon Chicken Project, you talk about grit and just rolling up your sleeves and getting things done. These gentlemen and what they've done with the Fayetteville Innovation Farms kind of program to think about poultry industry pollution. For many of us that have watched different documentaries and seen the sheer magnitude of waste and what happens when you don't have proper protocols and practices in place, it's a problem, a big problem. So kudos to this team thinking about incorporating biochar into poultry litter to mitigate environmental harm. Wishing them nothing but the best, and have been honored by the discussions we've been fortunate enough to have with all of them. The third is one that I think has gotten global attention. Certainly, is the Athletes Village for the 2025 Paralympic Games is going to feature biochar infused concrete. It's going to offer, I think I read up to a 10-fold reduction in carbon emissions compared to conventional concrete. What a use case and what visibility for this end use application. And then, as a big personal fan of Kind Bars, because being on the run and traveling and going, visiting sites, you need something quick and simple. Kind Bars always seem to do the trick, and I like them even more now that they're piloting a regenerative ag program and looking to apply biochar. I think it's going to be from almond shells to improve soil quality, retain water, and sequester carbon. So we see it now, and again, there are so many side elements. Just thinking about biochar and poultry litter to reduce odor, retain nutrients, manage moisture, improve waste handling, sequester carbon, the list goes on and on. So while I said at the very beginning of the talk, always skeptical about something that requires your heart to grow 3 sizes, with biochar, the economics are there and all of the operational efficiencies are there. It's a really, and this is why we my co-founders and I left what we were doing to do this full time. Just didn't see anything better to do what we need to do, both to get investors incited and drive the necessary scale to improve the ecosystem and get more where we need to go. So I will now progress into the capital stack discussion, which I know is one that Jim and I have sidebarred on a little bit. It's obviously one of the things that Grain has been at the forefront of and very adamant on trying to address and solve, and will help be part of the solution, is thinking about the capital stack. During Climate Week, so I'll back up a little bit. For those of you that were at the US Biochar Initiative event in Sacramento, my co-founder Ryan actually led a very dynamic panel focused on the capital stack. So we had individuals across equity and carbon removal financing and mezz debt, bank loans, etc., having a very dynamic discussion. The only feedback I got from the different attendees was if we could have had another couple of hours or a few more panels to focus on this. And we have been trying to do a number of things to address this. Certainly, some of the talks we've done post in partnership, with IBI and USBI have tried to build off of the momentum of this talk. But in addition, in the next week, we will be coming out with a bunch of short videos. You can see some of the images there, where I was really lucky to get to sit down with some of these leaders who have already placed bets on biochar cross stack. They are putting their money where their mouth is, and they're helping us avoid tragedy of the commons and really ensuring that projects are taking off. But they also will talk a lot about the things that they need to see and how they will lean in to help move the stack forward. And I'll highlight one of the things we didn't have that we have in this series was a discussion on the philanthropic capital. So at the Biochar Revolution event, we were joined by a company called TerraSet, Chris Wedding, who's the chairman of the board. They are looking at making essentially philanthropic capital injections into the space. I talked with their CEO, Adam Frazier, at length about how they're approaching the market, what kind of projects, and biochar is really at the top of their list, which makes me very, very happy because we need all of the different elements to solve the problem. And catalytic capital, slower, essentially capital that is a lot more patient, is much needed in the space today. So if you don't mind, let's dig into this a little bit more, Katie, and we'll look at the makeup and the structure that we're seeing today. Typically, when you think about our building blocks of biochar project finance, it varies. Cost of capital varies. A lot of times, if you're a first-time project developer and you maybe haven't done infrastructure development or project development work, even if it's been in other sectors, you may be looking at potentially giving up more ownership stake. Again, it depends on a lot of different factors. We're going to look at different scenarios that have worked from what we've seen in the past. But the easiest to modify, to monetize is when you think about the market. We've got to build the market for char, because even if you're a first-time developer, if you have offtake agreements in place and you're able to kind of highlight that split, especially a split between carbon credits and biochar offtake, that's something that could make things very credible, drive impact, and ultimately move projects forward. Likewise, physical char modernization, we've seen a lot of take or pay. That's typically an ironclad provision that a company can pursue in a contract. And basically what this means is that they're required to fulfill the obligation to buy the char or pay a fee in lieu of it. So again, these are things we're thinking about comprehensively when we're looking at these projects, and we're trying to provide guidance based on the outcomes, going through eligibility, going through carbon economics, to see how do we get this project off the ground and what's the best way to maximize the capital stack. And again, knowing that many state and federal governments have capital to spend, and if they don't spend it, they tend to lose it. What are some of the places we can look to potentially drive capital, non-dilutive capital, into your project outside of traditional USDA bank loans? And we'll go a little bit deeper now, Katie, if you don't mind, and we're going to look at a broader structure of the options. And I love this slide. And again, kudos, huge kudos to my co-founder, Ryan, for putting this together and really putting a lot of thought into this. I mean, he's written some of the top, most informative blog posts that I've come across related to the capital stack, and I highly encourage everybody to check them out on our Grain LinkedIn page. They go a lot deeper into these concepts. But the point of this slide is just to provide something at a very high level, because I get asked the question all the time, well, how should I think about private equity and venture? Should I go the venture route? I worked in private equity prior, driving capital into, again, energy as a service, microgrid projects. And you have to understand, what are their targets? Because when you do bring investors in, they have goals, and typically they have an exit plan in mind. So thinking about what that return structure might need to be for them, for the physical assets and the revenue streams tied to those assets, is really important. It's key that you are ring fencing the cash flows tied to these projects, whether it's tied to the carbon credits, it's tied to the NRCS reimbursement. You're looking at these other elements. That's important. And that's part of, again, what Grain looks to do, is to ring fence cash flows and give investors confidence in the operations of these facilities and ensuring that they're doing what they say they're doing. And at the end of the day, too, all of us have a job, another job, and that's when we are presenting to investors, ensuring that they're getting something that is tangible, it is as accurate as possible, and we're not misleading, because one bad look can really sour the market for a lot of us, because that could cause investors to step away and not want to pursue waste energy or biochar projects. So thinking about it in this way is really important. We've got some resources there at the bottom, and a couple other things that I want to call out that we think about is, you've got green loans. So for many of you, typically banks offer green loans for environmentally beneficial projects. Biochar is obviously in that bucket. We like these because they reflect low risk profile associated with sustainability initiatives, and they typically have more favorable terms, which will include lower interest rates. Additionally, you've got sustainable bonds. So sustainable or green bonds, again, another way to raise capital, more favorable, and allow people to fund net new biochar facilities and then potentially build scale in. One of the topics I talked a lot about at the Wall Street Green Summit was sustainable linked loans. So these loans basically reduce interest rates based on achieving sustainability targets. Again, if you think about a biochar project, you've got volume targets, you've got emission reduction targets, and this approach is really going to encourage borrowers to meet environmental goals. Some of the other stuff, getting a little bit more in the weeds, but just for you to think about, debt or equity swaps. So here is where a project developer can negotiate debt for equity. and basically convert part of their debt into equity stakes. And this is a common practice you'll see with startups and businesses that are raising money. They have a convertible note or something that will convert at different terms at another financing round, at a qualified financing round later on. And then certainly government and development funding. A great example of this is our friends at the International Development Finance Corporation. So government programs and development banks offering lower interest loans and or grants for projects, again, biochar, that are developing and demonstrating environmental benefits and economic development and all those other things. So let's advance onwards, but I felt it was really important to spend a few minutes on those points because that's how you think about the stack and how to make it work. So Kate, if you go back to that graph that shows what's the right mix, these are two of the mixes that we're seeing that tend to work in projects that have gotten funded. The first is scenario A. You have a bank loan with 20% capital from equity and carbon removal credit pre-purchase. Again, at Grain, we work with a lot of the key USDA-backed loan banks. We've built our Grain investor view and really the process with these financiers in mind. So we make it really easy for them to do their job and ultimately to issue MOUs and term sheets and things of that nature faster, because we have to inject speed. Everything is thought of with speed at the forefront. We are trying to think about how do we get more companies in the value chain to commit. So one of the things that I think is special about our business is one of our partners is Schneider Electric. Many of your places of business or homes have Schneider Electric products, whether that's switchgear, industrial automation, building control systems. They're very good at scope 1 and 2. And then they've got this massive value chain of customers that have lots of sugar mills and lumber mills and food processing facilities. So when you think about that, these companies are looking to procure carbon credits. They're looking to help companies in their value chain. So part of both of these mixes obviously is thinking about the carbon program, but scenario B is heavy on grants, it's heavy on bank loans, non-dilutive capital, matching funds, and helping you think through how do we get that matching money on the table, which is key. And we also look at equity financing. Some of the institutions are able to write those equity checks. One of the things that we really like and what we're seeing more of is the OEMs coming out with creative financing opportunities. So now developers don't have to put up the full CapEx up front. You can actually look at as a service, leaseback models, funding, leveraging future streams tied to carbon credits. And that's really important because if you have to come up with all the CapEx in year one operations out of the gate, that can be very, very difficult for project developers. And Grain has been very adamant and at the forefront of really pressing there because we have to get projects done. And I think the OEMs realize we need more projects. We need more use cases and reference sites and places to bring customers. So at our event, we had companies like Arty and Pyreg and a handful of others there talking about what they're doing and how they're being creative. Arty certainly come together with Maxim and NextWave to be flexible in the economics. It's very, very encouraging. I've spent a lot of time with our friends at Blue Sky as well, who's a USBC member. So we're constantly just trying to pick their brains and figure out how do we move faster and how do we get more capital in these projects. And that unlocks the flywheel for everybody. So a couple scenarios here. Always happy to go more in depth on other things we're seeing, but I do want to ensure that we're going to have some time for a little bit of Q&A. Let's go to the last couple of slides and then we will wrap up on the topics. One thing I want to highlight here, so when projects go through the Grain platform, again, it's important to make it easy and painless for investors to engage with your project. So we try to put projects in a form factor that align with the investment theses of different investors on our platform. Here you see it in the form of a card. So they'll get to look at the main outputs, NPV, IRR, biochar related elements, what does the offtake structuring look like? What is the emission structure, et cetera. And investors can engage, they can drill in, and they can look at all of the underlying dynamics of the project. So this is kind of how we've been at the forefront of sustainable investing and what you can expect as you go through our rigorous origination process to get to the point of being prepared to speak to investors. And again, the investors that we work with and engage on the Grain platform, they are all pre-vetted and have some kind of a thesis around biochar. They might be very, very big banks. They might be niche equity funds. They might be structured credit or very, very large pre-purchasers, but all of them have a thesis. All of them have a geographical preference, and all of them make that very clear. So we ensure we're not wasting anybody's time. We're getting projects in front of them that align with the investment thesis and with their roadmap and how they're looking to deploy capital. Next slide, my friend. And ultimately, if you think about the end-to-end, for Grain, it's the origination. How do we help you as fast as possible and rigorously as possible to drive integrity, transparency, and really put the power in the hand of the project developer to ensure you're optimizing your business use case, you have the right materials in place, and you can defend your project economics, which is really, really important. If you need a certain amount of money and you're going to raise that money, you have to be able to defend and educate that against that defense. And that is part of what we do with origination. Anybody in the world can create an account on Grain, go through our feasibility checker, see how you stack up against the major methodologies that are in the marketplace today. And then obviously, in our partnership with investors, our job is to ensure integrity, ensure these cash flows are being generated on a year-to-year basis, and also ensure that these assets are performing up to par. And I think that's really, really important as we continue to go through the process, and we continue to help you scale and raise more funding and do more projects and ensure for generations to come, your business is operating at a high level and ensuring you're able to maximize productization and operational efficiencies. And I think if you go to the next slide, we are at time. And I specifically, I want to make one last point, and I specifically wanted to leave at least, Jim, 10 minutes for any commentary and updates you had related to Minnesota Biochar Initiative. And obviously, if there are any pressing questions, I'm a very easy person, as many of you know, to get a hold of. We're always putting out content and new things. The last thing I just wanted to highlight really quickly, I missed, I realized as I was going through it, some of the other grant programs outside of NRCS. Wood Innovation Grant, which a number of our project developers have applied for. One of them has been successful in achieving that grant. There's the Rural Energy for America program, or REAP as we call it. So again, USDA providing grants and loan guarantees for renewable energy projects in rural areas. I think 10% of biochar projects today are producing electricity, which is very interesting. You've got updates from California Department of Food and Ag, their Healthy Soils program. There's an innovative conservation program, ICP, and then obviously all the work on research grants and DOE funding opportunities. So Jim, with that, I'm going to pause exactly with 10 minutes to go and yield the floor to you. But for me, this has been a really great honor, and I hope it's the first of many, many times we'll get to collaborate and share more use cases on the stuff that's happening in the biochar industry.
Oh, thank you, Jason. Very much appreciated. There's a lot of info put together, both on the basics, and also that's one of the aspects in our Char Talks we haven't had a lot on, is on the financing side of this and how to make a project a reality. A couple of notes, just appreciate everyone staying muted during the sessions. So if you would like to see or be invited again to the Char Talk on our standard list, please make sure you leave your name and contact or email in the chat. We'd be happy to talk to you. Put in there the link to the Minnesota Biochar Initiative LinkedIn page. If you're not following, please go there and follow us and hear more information. But we'd like to see you again at Char Talk. Also, if you have a topic for Char Talk, please let me know. And at this time, you can either put your questions into the chat or go ahead and raise your hands and we'll start calling people out for talks. And while we're waiting for hands to raise, except, we got one, I think, up here.
Yeah, Jim, actually, two things. I see a question that I think was a really important one that I'll touch on. Also, for everybody, I put the link to the slide, that slide I showed in the carbon economics, in the chat, so you all have it. I did not want to. I didn't forget. I made a note to do that in all in the talking. Jim, maybe Jim, I'll do this. I'll defer to you. I'll let you pick the questions. I just saw one on investors helping to fund front-end feasibility. I could take that one or any question you want me to take.
Oh, yeah, no, go right ahead and take that one here. I know, Nick, So a quite active participant, one of the people at the front end of MNBI. So go ahead.
So the question from my friend Nick, and I've had the privilege of meeting Nick before. I didn't associate the name at first till I hovered over the question, is, are there any investors helping to fund the front end feasibility studies? And essentially the root of the question really is thinking about, upfront costs and having issues really, getting even the base level bridge capital. Nick, what I can tell you, first of all, I hear the frustration on this question because our team and myself in particular have been pounding the pavement. Here's what I can tell you. First of all, we're starting to finally see a bit of a breakthrough with impact investors. Impact investors, obviously, like Tom Steyer, who wrote the book behind me, and again, one that I encourage folks to read, are focused on climate solutions, and they're willing to provide early stage funding to de-risk projects. So basically, what we've seen in a couple instances, if you have good sound, if you have a couple of good sound things in place that you can present to the right impact investor or to the right, let's call it philanthropic organization, they will tend to fund the feasibility study in an effort to quantify both the environmental and economic potential of the project. And that essentially, the reason they do that, from my knowledge and my discussions with them, is really as a way to further de-risk the project, to make it easier for them to deploy capital. The other thing I would say is we're seeing development banks and multilateral funds looking to put up some of that cash. Some examples would be, the Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, the Green Climate Fund. Obviously, me personally, I think they need to do more. I think they need to go faster. Coming out of COP28, you saw the Loss and Damage Fund. I was hoping that fund was going to throw off more cash to answer the question you had. And I think government grants. We need the government grant programs to be eligible for these kind of, to go forward and help fund some of this bridge capital. So I will, and by the way, Jim, all these questions, we will put together more detailed responses because we're not going to get to all of them, but I want to make sure we have them all listed out, and I will make sure we get responses and we post those live.
That'd be great. And we do have a question from Church Lewis, and I apologize if I'm not sure if I got the front name and the last name backwards. But
no, Church is the first name. Thank you. That's exactly
fantastic.
Right. Hi, Jason. How are you? Following up on the same thing. This front feasibility money. Two questions. One is, if it's coming from impact investors, equity investors, what sort of return are they looking on that catalytic capital that's being used up front just to put the project application together, number one? And number two, what about the philanthropic community that is stated, how many participants in that community are there that have the stated purpose of being catalytic to get these kind of things going? So two questions there as a follow-up to what you just said.
Two great ones. So I can answer the first one with a lot more certainty than the second one still, because again, it's the rubber meeting the road. So there haven't been enough proof points yet that I've seen or that I would like to see. And I think that all of us on this call would like to see. Your first question is really pretty straightforward. Many of the impact investors that have either invested in biochar that we've talked to, accept lower financial returns, obviously, than traditional VC or private equity. They typically are looking for returns in the range of 5 to 12% annually. Again, risk profile and project timeline, always key. We like to tell them and preface, hey, biochar is this is a time to scale and mature industry, and these projects take time to scale. So you also want to make sure you really nail in on what is their time horizon. This is common in projects that are large infrastructure, and certainly what we see with carbon removals. And remember, they're always looking at the elements of revenue generation. And this is why we like to see projects that can have potentially 3 sources of revenue: the credits, the soil amendments, the waste management, energy production, etc. But that, Church, is kind of what we're seeing. And again, on the the companies coming in, I mean, the biggest name that everybody kind of pings me about certainly is like the Rockefeller Foundation, groups of similar stature there. They posted some really good stuff. I see them at a lot of the events. They're very active, as are some of the other, compatriots there that are looking at these opportunities. But there's not enough use cases I can really point to that are highlighting, some of that capital being put to work. It's mostly looking at, these private markets leveraging, public programs to get projects over the hurdle. But we will put a list together of some of the notable philanthropic groups and agencies, and we'll publish that so you have it. I'll make sure it's comprehensive.
Thank you.
And Jason, there's an interesting question from Thomas Kripe, I believe it is that on a proposal to structure ag industrial REIT to form a cooperative for farmers.
Wow. That's an interesting one. So I think that, and for those of you on the call, a REIT is a last I checked, real estate investment trust. Was familiar with that in my private equity days, looking at some of the folks engaging there. And I think the crux of your question is essentially that this would allow investors to invest in agricultural land, farms, and related infrastructure, and provide a bridge to gain exposure to biochar projects without directly owning or operating farmland. So I think you're onto something really interesting. I think that it's not hard to structure a REIT. I think you've got to look at ownership and leasing and what are the different crop types. Advantages there too, Jim, obviously are steady income, great appreciation, nice diversification, very much low risk. And the challenge is, you've got cyclicality and operational complexity. The key is going to be finding partners. So the only one I can reference off the top of my mind, because I haven't looked at this as close, is the American Farmland Company. They are smaller. I happen to know one of the people over there, and they're really all about high quality farmland. And what they do is they lease to farmers or ag businesses. So I think it's a great idea. I'd love to explore it. I'd love to do a little bit more diligence, but I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's a great way to pull big capital into the space. Because I always go to my buddies in private equity. I'm like, hey, you've got billion-dollar funds. You're looking at renewables. You're looking at CCUS. How do we get them in the right vehicle to come into this space? And I think a REIT could do wonders there. So awesome question. First time I've gotten that question. So I will dig into it more in detail.
All right, we do have a couple other questions, but I wanted to give a moment to John Webster from USBI. He popped up here briefly, but if anything else, to give an opportunity to promote the USBI North American Conference in 2025.
What? There's a conference in 2025? Yeah, that's right. September 15th through 18th. So start looking at tickets now. It's going to sell out. So we're hoping to have a website up with some more information before the end of the year. You can count on the call for abstracts and talks coming along. So make sure you're watching for that. Everybody that's on our list will be getting contacted about it. Watch the USBI website, and biocharconference.com will be updated. So also Jim and his team have been very helpful. They're on board with us, so it's going to be a fantastic event. We've been assured there's lots of hotels and places where we can all meet and have lots of biochar activity hubs. So looking forward to it.
Well, you can meet here at the MNBI World Headquarters.
Yes.
Yep, but you'll be in Minneapolis in 2025. But John, thank you very much. I knew you'd be on board for that one. And I really do appreciate USBI's support of Char Talk and the promotion of it. So
your operation will be full bore by then, right? So
it should be.
We'll get to do a tour.
Oh,
so everybody look forward to that tour. Bring your hard hats.
No, that's fantastic. So we do have had another question in the chat. Katie, do you have are you looking at that by chance? Just getting back over here.
Yes,
Good to see you, John.
All right.
I can read that out if that would be helpful. Looks
would be
like
great.
Samuel asked this question, and they said looking for help to effectively promote before, during, and after COP29 the launch of a biochar project in Ukraine. Any tips?
Well, interestingly enough, and it's a very interesting topic, because obviously the whole point of COP. So just as an aside, by the way, I lived in Dubai for 3 years, and I wasn't surprised to see COP28. And the reason I make that statement is we need everybody to come together to promote the industry, but more importantly, raise awareness and, craft a narrative that can help the country and to accelerate, some support there. So I think that first of all, we have the brain trust on this call today to put together collectively a compelling story around the biochar project in Ukraine. I think outside of addressing the importance of climate challenges, it should probably focus on, resilience, recovery, sustainability, all the elements that are so needed in that region today. And, Jim, maybe I put the hat back on you and John with our support for this one, but maybe, as a group, we come together, we take some leadership and we think about, all right, what do we need to build? How do we do it? And I think we could have maybe somebody has an exhibition booth. That's probably the most realistic thing, because you have everybody there. You got to drive them to that booth and offer live demos of the opportunity. Because obviously getting on site, I'm always the first person to say get on site. That's probably not most optimal, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. We could formalize a commitment among this group. And, I would point to certainly John Webster and maybe one or two others to help lead. And we will all lean in to ensure that we can promote that opportunity and be very conscientious. It's a great question. I think that's something that should be at the forefront for all of us, especially in the fragmented world we're living in today. So great question. And count on Grain to be part of it, however we can.
Oh, that is a some very interesting topics here today, or questions here today, from a wide variety. We're at the top of the hour, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Jason. I'm glad we are finally able to connect and get you on board here. So first met Jason out in Sacramento at this year's USBI conference, and glad we're able to finally follow up and get you on here. If you
thanks again, Jim. Thanks again, and I'll close by saying, as John would say, the right question is more answer. So thanks for the great question. Thanks for bearing with me, and hopefully everybody found it valuable. And let's keep at it. We're making great progress.
Fantastic. All right. Hey, thank you folks for joining us here today. We'll see you later, hopefully next month at the November Char Talk.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.